Well, today I guess we're going to take a look at the investor deck and see the bones of MindMed and check out some of the information that they've provided to the general public. This video is going to be a little longer than most. I try to keep them around 4 to 5 minutes just so it's, enough information that you get what you need, but not too much that you lose interest or it's boring. But I hope you stick around to the end because there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. So let's start with the first page and go from there. Disclaimer, nothing too interesting. It's all legal jargon. Who gives a shit? A paradigm shift is needed in mental health. Psychedelic-inspired medicines offer solutions to retool and address a continuum of large mental health problems. So as you can see, their main goal is not for people to get high, even though about 50% of the business is drug-induced therapies through psychedelic guidance for various things like depression and anxiety and things like that. But yeah, let's take a look. 40 million suffer from anxiety, 10 million from ADHD, 20 million from addiction, and 17 million from depression. Now, the LSD trials, which will be starting phase 2, are for ADHD in adults specifically, and anxiety, and the ibogaine is for addiction, although it does have potential for depression, but I believe that they're trying to tackle depression with psilocybin instead. A psychedelic opportunity. Through regulated human clinical trials, MindMed develops medicines inspired by psychedelics that address significant unmet needs. Psychedelics Schedule 1 drugs LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, and ibogaine. A resurgence in the research of psychedelic substances supports the development of psychedelic-inspired medicines. Transformative medicines, such as migraines, PTSD, drug addiction, depression, and alcoholism. MindMed is assembling the most compelling IP portfolio, clinical pipeline, and drug development platform in the new psychedelic industry. A new class of medicines. MindMed is pioneering a new way to treat mental health, both through non-hallucinogenic, as I mentioned earlier, and hallucinogenic means. Firstly, the non-hallucinogenic, derived from psychedelics with zero to negligible hallucinogenic effects, doctor prescription, pharmacy pickup, and take home. So what they've made a derivative out of LSD, psilocybin, and 18-MC, which is the compound synthesized, from ibogaine. And they've turned those into pharmaceuticals that they're currently testing with their phase 2 that will begin in New York. And phase 1 was completed partially in California and partially here in Canada. The I have trouble with this word. Hallucinogenic therapies is consisting of a higher dose of the pure cut up version of the drug, such as LSD. Direct supervision and therapy sessions overseen by therapists and doctors with in-clinic treatment only. I am unfamiliar with esketamine, but I know that ketamine, the psychedelic, is used for depression. But yes, Johnson & Johnson approved in 2019 and currently has on market a ketamine substance that is a nasal spray. And they are also researching psilocybin, LSD, and MDMA. And one of the hopes mentioned in a video earlier is that I posted by the CEO is that there is potential to be acquired. So that would be a nice little bump for everybody. MindMed's regulatory approach. Psychedelics will be commercialized as regulated medicines. Regulated clinical trials of Schedule 1 substances are legal. High barriers to entry and limiting factors. GMP production and supply drugs. Research scientists with psychedelics background. experienced clinical drug development teams, clinical data licensing, development of IP, intellectual property, and patent filings. Preclinical phase 1, 2, and 3 trials cost time and money, um, which I debated with somebody on Reddit. They did not quite understand the concept of taking a company public, but private funding only goes so far until those private investors want a return, and government funded research into psychedelic drugs has always hit a stalemate due to the failed war on drugs from the Reagan administration that started in 1985, I think. And yeah, it's been hit or miss. So to me, going public is not a bad thing. It's the only way to get real capital to push these drugs forward. And if you're smart enough to catch the wave early, make a nice profit by investing. And these, as it goes on to state regulatory approvals, federal regulation enable market exclusivity and IP definability. Oh shit, I can't speak for shit. Equals institutional capital. First FDA-approved psychedelic medicine, as stated earlier from the Johnson & Johnson development and research, is the Spravato from ketamine, and it was approved by the FDA for treatment-resistant depression. Annual global sales forecast in 2024 is 1.3 billion US dollars, 1.7 Canadian. So we're looking around the similar sales for so far their LSD compound and their ibogaine compound. Fingers crossed for the psilocybin. Um, we'll see. The clinical pipeline MindMed is advancing and building a compelling pipeline of psychedelic-inspired medicines through clinical trials. MindMed will continue to expand its pipeline and IP over the next 6 to 12 months through co-development and agreements, in licensing with leading academic research institutions of existing and new clinical research in psychedelics. So what it boils down to is that they are going to be a growth through acquisition company, much like the 18-MC ibogaine derivative that they use for substance abuse, like opioids. They purchased that from a study in California that was started in 2013, but due to federally illegal barriers and a stalemate in the research and funding drying up, that halted, I believe, late 2014, late 2015, and sat stagnant until the CEO realized that there was potential for these, purchased them, and now they're continuing their research in Canada and doing their clinical trials in the US for phase 2 in New York, as I stated earlier. So, area of research: opioid withdrawal treatment, opioid use disorders, and adult ADHD, which a lot of people disagree that LSD might be a good compound to give somebody with ADHD, 18 and older, but it is actually a fungus derived naturally and then synthesized into the psychoactive ingredient that it is, and much more healthier than something like Adderall that has it's an amphetamine, which is slightly related to a hardcore version like methamphetamine or crystal meth, if you want to be blunt. Anyways, continuing on, opioid crisis calls for urgent solution. Existing addiction treatments are inadequate. So the new FDA incentives for opioid treatments, which began April 2018, accelerated through approval and breakthrough designation for development of treatments for opioid use disorders. And the lowered threshold for approval was August 2018. Fewer occasions per day rather than total abstinence, which is they're stating that these people who went through the phase 1 trials, they ended up using, while some did relapse, they used fewer than before on the ibogaine drug with opioid abuse. and it costs an average of $500 billion to the state or to the country of America. I don't even know the world or Canada included, but yeah, $500 billion annually to treat opioid addiction. That's a lot of money. 18MC, a solution for the opioid crisis. A transformational approach to addiction based on the psychedelic substance ibogaine. So, why they synthesized it into a single molecular compound versus just using the ibogaine root itself? As you can see on the screen, it says it, although highly effective, is very bad for your vascular system and cardiac, heart. That whole system just can't handle it. And even if you do the root, you may not feel these kind of cardiac side effects immediately, but it can stay in your system for upwards of 2 weeks when you can begin to have problems. And the downside of using these are they are not Schedule 1. They do have a long hallucinogenic experience, and they are bad for you, whereas the derivative is highly effective, just like the root, but the upsides are it is cardiac safe, non-hallucinogenic, and you can schedule this without any interference from the government. 18MC, a solution for opioid crisis continued, reducing addiction substances without the trip. So as you can see, if you take a look, these are 3 charts with the placebos versus the ibogaine solution and 18MC, and there's a vast difference. The 18MC is also compared to morphine, cocaine, and water, with the molecular structure down in the bottom right under the wired square. 18MC addresses addiction as a brain disease. Addiction is a disease of the brain. All addictive substances, Jesus, I should have drank some water first, result in dysregulation of the dopamine reward pathways. And as we all know, or for those of you that don't, dopamine is the natural drug that your body produces to keep you happy. And drugs like cocaine can alter that, making you dependent on the cocaine to make you happy instead of having your body naturally produce the dopamine itself. Now, brain image showing decreased dopamine receptors in the brain. So that would be the person on the left here, the cocaine abuser, versus somebody who does not partake of the drug, naturally producing ibogaine. That word just is dopamine in the red. Key highlights and insights: new addiction solutions must be addressed. Dopamine dysregulation in patients. 18MC addresses addiction as a brain disease. Continued. Opioid addiction alters the brain to crave and release more dopamine, which creates a high. And this is what causes the dopamine levels in the brain to decrease when you use drugs, because your body doesn't produce the dopamine that it would, because it's getting it from somewhere else. It's getting it from the substance you're putting in your body. So 18MC, derived from ibogaine, regulates the dopamine highs, thus taking you off of your Oxycontin or whatever opioid ailment. A disruptive solution for addiction will be highly valuable. Treatments that are not highly effective still generate huge annual revenues. The projected worldwide pharma sales for opioid abuse in 2019, $2.9 billion. This investor deck was released in November, so everything here is current, but it will say 2019. The blockbuster drug potential: substance abuse by the numbers, opioid use disorder, alcohol use disorder, tobacco, helping you kick cigarettes, cocaine, and methamphetamine disorder. This is all applicable for ibogaine and the derivative they have created, and $42 billion US addiction rehab market. So just alone in the rehab market for America, 42 billion annually projected is quite a decent return on an early investment. The microdosing program for LSD in MindMed is conducting its first ever phase 2 microdosing trial in adults, and as I stated earlier, that will commence Q4, and it will be in New York this time, not in Canada. 10 million ADHD adult sufferers, 16 million US adults on prescription stimulants. Man, I tell you, when I started this YouTube channel, I forgot how hard it is to talk to a computer. Jeez, you just get tongue-tied and your mouth dry. Sorry, anyways. But yes, the self-medication trend with microdosing is illegal, and the self-prescribed usage can be dangerous with no medical supervision. But with the LSD variants that they have created through the FDA approval process, there are non-hallucinogenic medicines with the potential for ADHD and without the highly addictive and negative, like, what are they called? Ritalin. Ritalin's ADHD medication is actually a form of speed and can be abused, which many college kids do for tests and things like that, or crunching. But moving on, you get the idea. The ADHD demographic and markets in the US. People with ADHD are at least 1.5 times more likely to develop substance abuse disorders to substances like nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, and cocaine. In my opinion, marijuana should not even be on that list. It is highly irrelevant. 10, you don't see alcohol on there. Yeah, you do. Funny. Anyways, 10.9% of adults with ADHD receive treatment. Only 25% of adults with ADHD have been diagnosed in childhood or adolescence. Myself included, actually. I suffer from ADD severely, which is why you'll see a large gap in between my videos. ADHD diagnosis among adults are growing 4 times faster than diagnosis among children in the United States. The prevalence of ADHD among adults rose from 0.43% to 0.96% between 2007 and 2016 at a 123% increase. ADHD market dominated by stimulants. As I stated earlier, stimulant drugs of the methamphetamine type nature, like Adderall, are the prevalent go-to prescription by doctors currently, as there is nothing on the market at all. So this LSD research is quite interesting. Projected worldwide pharma sales for ADHD in 2019, 9.2 billion. MindMed in the news. Who cares? The only thing that I have to say that I found interesting is that CB Insights last year in January, they launched their top interesting world-changing companies, and MindMed happened to be on there along with Compass Pathways and another great company in the UK called Small Pharma. I suggest you look it up. It is they have a ketamine for depression study, and it is quite interesting. Potential catalysts, past execution. As you can see on the left, I'm not going to read it out because I'm tired of reading. Everything on the left is what they have done. Everything on the right is what they are up to. So I'll let that sit up on the screen for a minute and you can have a quick look or pause your computer or phone. The investment, significant past investments in 18MC. So right here, as I spoke about earlier with the ibogaine derivative, yes, the grant was given in 2013 for the research before it dried up, and it was purchased August of 2019, so not that long ago, and they continued the phase 1 of the ibogaine studies because they saw the promise and it was actually working. Part of the reason why I invested in this company is because I'm only going to invest in something if the data shows that it works. If the data shows that it works, it's worked in enough patients for phase 1 that they're willing to try a phase 2, then they have something there. Whether people want to debate the numbers or the share price, shares outstanding, anything like that, I don't care about that stuff because I'm holding this long term. So the rest just doesn't matter. Long term potential is it works, it's there, and if it does not become something that is, you know, distributed in its own right through MindMed, it will at least be acquired, and any shareholders will be compensated for their shares, just like the Johnson and Johnson acquisition of the ketamine nasal spray for depression. Oh, yes, investors, Kevin O'Leary, yes, uh, and the founder of Bale Capital. He's just a hedge fund manager. But I think that the reason that you don't see a lot of Bruce Linton, like, he is one of the main drivers in why this company is moving forward. But I believe that he is sitting on the sidelines. Like, you did not see him at the listing at the Neo Exchange. If you look up any pictures on Google, you won't see him with the rest of the group. I believe he's trying to distance himself from or separate psychedelics from cannabis. They want to make it clear that this is not supposed to be a recreational investment or like a recreational use case, strictly a medical use case, and they want to keep the lines clear on where they stand. And I believe that by putting Bruce Linton front and center after his years of pushing recreational drugs, it just would be a bad face for the company. So I believe we'll see him, probably in a year or two, but for now, I think he's just lying low. The executive team, J.R. Rand, co-founder and CEO with a history of Uber and Y Combinator. Stephen L. Hurst, co-founder and CEO of Nectar, that is a pharmaceutical company. Eli Lilly, another pharmaceutical company. NewGen and Nectar as well. NewGen is also a Nugenics biopharmaceutical company. Onyx, Nevinar, Roche, Pfizer. They have lots of history in the pharmaceutical industry, so they know what they're doing. And I believe that is the end of the deck. I hope you guys didn't fall asleep. That was hard as shit, man. Like, trust me, you don't want to be doing it. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed and have a wonderful day. Peace.